The first snow fell the day she buried the last piece of her old life. It came down slow and silent, like the sky itself was trying not to disturb her grief. Eliza Harper stood alone at the edge of the frozen ridge, her black coat swallowed by wind, her boots half buried in white powder. No family stood behind her. No minister waited beside her. The world had already taken everyone who would have called her name. Her father had died the previous winter. The fever took her mother before spring could thaw the ground, and the man she once believed she would marry never returned from the gold camps beyond the northern pass. Letters stopped coming. Hope followed shortly after. The town below the mountain had grown smaller with every loss, or maybe it only felt that way because there was no one left inside it for her. She had sold the house, sold the piano, sold the last silver locket her mother used to polish on Sundays. All that remained were 2 suitcases, a thin coin purse, and a stubborn refusal to die where everyone she loved already had. So she left. The mountains were not her destination at first. They were simply there, looming against the horizon like a warning. People said no one survived past the tree line in early winter. They said the wilderness swallowed the foolish whole. But Eliza did not feel foolish. She felt empty. And sometimes empty people walk into storms because they no longer fear being lost. By the second day, the road vanished beneath snowdrifts. By the third, her horse gave out. She continued on foot, the wind carving her face raw, her fingers numb inside threadbare gloves. Pride kept her moving long after strength began to fail. It was nearing dusk when her body finally betrayed her. The world tilted. Her knees hit snow, and darkness reached up from beneath the mountain to claim her. Rowan Hale had lived half his life above the timberline. He knew the language of wind better than that of men. He could track elk across frozen rock and light a fire in sleet with shaking hands. The cabin he built from pine and stone stood alone in a valley most maps didn't bother to name. He preferred it that way. Silence didn't judge. Snow didn't lie. But as Rowan checked his trap lines that evening, something broke the rhythm of winter, a faint shape where no shape should have been, a dark fold against the white. He froze. The mountains were ruthless. Anything still out in weather like this was either dead or close to it. He approached slowly, boots crunching through crusted snow. When he turned the body onto its back, a pale face stared up at him, framed by frost-stiffened hair. A woman. Breathing, but barely, Rowan swore under his breath. He hadn't shared his cabin with another soul in 5 years. He hadn't wanted to. Solitude was easier, safer. But leaving her here would be a death sentence. And Rowan Hale might belong to the wilderness, but he was not cruel. He lifted her into his arms, surprised by how light she felt. Like something already halfway between this world and the next. Snow whipped against his face as he carried her down the ridge, boots slipping, shoulders straining. Twice he nearly fell. Inside the cabin, he laid her near the fire and worked with steady, capable hands. He peeled off frozen boots, wrapped her in furs, warmed stones and tucked them close. He poured broth between her lips and willed her not to drift away. "Don't you dare," he muttered, though he wasn't sure why the idea unsettled him so deeply. She stirred near midnight. Her eyes opened, grey, clouded with confusion, and her first breath came sharp and fearful. "You're alive?" Rowan answered quietly. "That's what matters." She tried to sit up. Pain crossed her face. The effort drained what little strength she had regained. "I must have died," she whispered. "This can't be real." He huffed softly. "Trust me, this is very real." Her gaze swept the one-room cabin, the stacked firewood, the iron stove, the animal pelts lining the walls. And then, finally him. He knew what she saw. A broad-shouldered man with a heavy beard, dark hair streaked with early silver, rough hands and eyes shaped by solitude. More mountain than town. She didn't scream. She didn't shrink back. Instead, her eyes filled. That unsettled him more than fear would have. "You should have left me," she said faintly. "There's nothing waiting for me." Rowan straightened slowly, studying her face. "You walked into a mountain in winter," he said. "That tells me you either lost everything, or you're braver than you know." Her bottom lip trembled. She pressed it still with stubborn force. He handed her a tin cup. "Drink." For a long moment, she just stared into the steam rising between them. Then she whispered, "My name is Eliza." Rowan hesitated, as if names meant something sacred. Rowan. The fire crackled softly. Wind pressed against the cabin walls, and in that simple exchange something fragile shifted. Not love, not yet, but the beginning of not being alone. Recovery in the mountains is never gentle. Eliza stayed 3 days before she could stand without swaying. Rowan said little during that time. He chopped wood, checked snares, cooked quietly. But always he made sure the fire never dimmed. On the 4th morning, she insisted on helping. He handed her potatoes to peel. She nearly cut herself twice. He watched silently, then reached out, enclosing her hand in his to guide the blade steady. His hands were warm, callosed, solid. She hadn't realized how long it had been since someone touched her without asking for something in return. Her breathing changed. He noticed. Rowan stepped back immediately, as if proximity itself was dangerous. That evening the storm came. Not gentle snowfall, but a roaring, screaming blizzard that rattled shutters and clawed at the roof. The cabin groaned beneath it. Wind forced smoke back down the chimney. Snow slipped through cracks in the frame. Eliza tried to be brave, but when thunder rolled through the valley and the walls trembled, the composure she'd stitched together since burying her mother finally tore apart. She sank to the floor, covering her ears, shaking. Rowan crossed the room in 3 strides, and then he did the one thing he hadn't allowed himself to do. He wrapped his arms around her. Not hesitantly, not halfway, fully. She froze at first, stunned by the sudden enclosure of strength, by the grounding weight of him. His chest was solid against her back, his chin resting lightly in her hair. "Easy," he murmured. "The mountain makes noise. Doesn't mean it'll fall." Her hands gripped his sleeves, and just like that, something inside her broke free. She sobbed, not polite tears, not quiet grief, but the kind that empties lungs and splits the chest open. Years of swallowed sorrow poured out into his shirt. Rowan didn't move, didn't speak, didn't judge. He simply held her. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, something steadier formed. When her breathing finally slowed, she realized she wasn't shaking anymore. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you save me?" He hesitated because the answer scared him too, because no one deserves to face winter alone. Silence settled between them again. But this time it wasn't empty. It was warm. She tilted her head slightly, just enough to feel the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against her shoulder. For the first time since she lost everything, or the world didn't feel like it was ending. It felt like it was beginning. And Rowan Hale, the man who had chosen silence over society, cold over comfort, realized something dangerous. He did not mind holding her, not at all. The storm lasted until dawn. His arms never left her, and when morning light finally touched the snow-covered valley, 2 people who had once belonged to nothing belonged quietly to each other.